Hi, everybody. Bonnie Gillespie here, and today we are going to talk about the $200 lesson. So, here's how this came into my life. I was in my very early 20s and I was living in Atlanta. I had graduated college and was in that year between college graduation and finally deciding it was time to move to Los Angeles. And I was working pretty steadily. I had a really good working actor life. I also did some substitute teaching on the days when I wasn't out working, but there were a lot of, corporate non-broadcast, commercial, theater gigs, a ton of voiceover, a lot of hand modeling, and of course the occasional show or a movie that would come through town and need some actors. So there was a lot of good stuff going on in the early 90s, and I was busy. And I have this brother who has these children, now adults, but at the time children. And there was a time that he and his wife were going out of town and wanted to leave the kids behind and said, while we were all gathered for a family dinner, Bon, we want to hire you to stay with the kids. And they were going to be gone for a long time, like 10 days. And I was going to need to book out with my agents, plural, because I had multiple reps, as you do in a market like that where exclusive rep is not required. I had to book out with my reps. I also had to go off avail for all my substitute teaching, which was a nice paycheck for every time that I was invited in to sub. So because I was, of course, he was going to pay me. He said right out front how much it was going to be, and he was going to pay me enough that it was worth it to say no to all of these sub work, yes, but also these acting jobs that were, much more important in terms of growing my career as an actor. But for this stretch of time and getting to be with the kids, yeah, of course I was going to do it. I made it my full-time job to stay with the kids, get them off to school, take them to all their after-school activities, help them with homework, get them, cleaned, fed, to bed on time, all the stuff that parents, I'm sure, know all about. And it was a lot for this young non-kid having kiddo of her own here. And at the end of the experience, my brother came back into town and handed me a sealed envelope and thanked me for my time with his kids, and off I went. And I then opened the envelope, and first of all, it was a very corporate thing to like hand a sealed envelope over. But I opened the envelope, and the check that was inside was for less than what we had agreed to, and it was less than by $400. And I was not okay with that because that's a lot of money for me to have been shorted. And it's one thing if we had agreed to that amount, but that wasn't what we had agreed to. And so I actually went back to his house because I had opened it over lunch. My mom and I had met for lunch right near his place, and she encouraged me to do so because, of course, she was there when he offered the full amount and said, yeah, you should definitely go back and tell him you're remembering this wrong. You got this rate wrong. You need to pay up the rest. And it was a very adult thing for me to have to deal with at that early 20s age there. And it was a confrontation that I was not looking forward to because my brother is very successful in business and had, done so and gotten so high up in his career because of his shrewd negotiation tactics and being a little heartless when it came to dealing with people and money and negotiating, and there's a lot to be learned from that. But when you're sensitive baby sister, it's not something you want to be on the other side of. But I had to go over there and say, hey, this is not what we agreed to. And it, without going into big family details and drama, deteriorated into a lot of negativity and me being called an extortionist and all sorts of really interesting things about his memory of what had happened. And I said to my mom when I went back over to her house later and was crying and wasn't successful in getting the full amount that I was due for this service that I had done, she said, honey, I'm sorry that you've been through this. I'm going to tell you, knowing his history, this has happened in lots of places. He's what we call a hero of the moment. This is a phrase I didn't learn until many years later. My mom didn't say he's known as a hero of the moment, but that's what I later learned this is. And it's when you're in front of a group of people, you talk really big and you come up with all these amazing plans and these promises. And then when it comes time, one-on-one to actually do the thing, you don't follow through. And we see a lot of that in the entertainment industry. There's a lot of hero of the moment in the, like, oh yeah, when you move to LA, call me. we'll get together, and then that never happens. Or worse, call me when you get to town and I'll rep you. And of course, then there's no repping to be done. Oh, if only you were in town, I would cast you. And then you're in town and there's no casting to happen. The hero of the moment happens a lot, especially with social media, because it's really easy to look, big pimping out there in the world. And then when it comes time to collect, not so much. So this issue was something that continued to eat away at me. And as y'all know from my whole, open ticket, closed ticket issue there, where if I can close the ticket, even if I don't like the news, at least I can move on. This was an open ticket for a while. I wrote a very strongly worded letter to my brother, explaining exactly my side and what my mother had witnessed and what he knew to be true, and telling him what the right thing to do was. Also doing the math of I would not have booked out on even my substitute teaching job had I known I was going to be shorted so much that I couldn't actually live off what I had been told I was going to get. And I laid it all out and mailed the letter, and he sent me a check for $200, which means I ended up overall being shorted $200. So he split the difference of what he had actually shorted me, the $400, sent the $200, and did the whole in full and final payment thing on the memo line. And the whole thing was just so douchey and not big brothery at all, but very definitely business lesson-y. So I'm glad for it. What my mom said that I have never forgotten in all these years was, she said, "Well, honey, I guess you just bought a $200 lesson." Here's why that's so valuable. Because what I actually was out was $200, but I bought a lesson for $200. And that lesson has continued to feed me when I have seen red flags about people that I'm doing business with, where I thought, we may be dealing with a hero of the moment here, or where I've invested time and energy. This happens a lot in independent film casting, where you'll believe in a project and they don't have all their financing together, but you'll go ahead and sign on because they'll pay you a little start money. You'll go out and start trying to get name actors attached and all this goodwill, and these relationships in your web of trust are being stressed out and used, and there's a tax that you're paying on every use of that web of trust. And then the project falls through. It turns out they never even had the amount of money that they told you that they had going in. And there are times in casting where I've been burned for far more than $200. But what I'm able to say is, oh yeah, that's a $200 lesson. That's a $200 lesson. And hopefully, once you have one of these, whatever your version of a $200 lesson is, and hopefully it didn't cost you much more than that, you're able to learn that once and maybe not over and over and over again. Or if you do have to learn it over again, you're pretty quick to go, my God, I already bought that lesson. Why do I keep buying it again? And then hopefully that allows you to spend less money, time, and energy focused on something that is, okay, lesson bought, close the ticket, move on. And letting that go feels so good. Let me show you how that plays out in another way. That very recently, in fact, I had booked my tickets for a flight because of this business retreat that I'm going on. And I was really super excited. And I did not want to wait for the itinerary. I just knew it was from this day to this day. So I needed to fly internationally to be at this place for this retreat. So I would buy my flight sometime around here and then sometime around here. And I'm sure the itinerary was going to work out to be within that framework. And, my wanting to close that ticket meant I went ahead and spent money on flights before I actually knew what our timeline was going to be. Cut to, I'm sent the itinerary, and I got it wrong on the return flight side of things and was actually making myself come home several hours before the program was even over. And, I just calculated, well, this is probably when they're going to have us leave the hotel or the inn where we're staying. And so that's certainly they're not going to be doing program activities for many hours after that. Turns out they are. Oops. So I had to call the airline and then call another airline and deal with all the change fee and then the new ticket, and the whole thing just ended up costing a ridiculous amount of money to make the changes. And I remember saying I could be really upset about having spent the initial money and then having spent money on a change fee, or I can label that change fee the fee for not having an open ticket for the 3 weeks between when I booked the retreat and when I got the itinerary. Because that 3-week period during which I didn't know what travel plans would be would actually fester in my brain and keep me from creating things that make me far more money than I spent on either the early booking or the change fee and all the things that went along with it. So I want you to start to look for ways that you can reframe money, and specifically money that you feel like, oh, I should have had to spend that. Like, oh, I had to pay that extra thing. We call parking tickets asshole tax. And if we forget to move the car on a street sweeping day, we get charged an asshole tax. And you know what? Considering how many times we've successfully moved the car and not been there on a street sweeping day and not had to pay that asshole tax, if once every few years we get it wrong, we forget that we've got a car parked over there and shit, today's the day, and the guy drives by in the street sweeper, and of course we know that the ticket guy came around right before that, and we got to pay that $65 asshole tax. Okay, no big deal. And what we do instead is say, and how awesome was it that for those moments we didn't stress, we didn't go, oh, do I have to move the car? We didn't freak out. We didn't think, oh, I have to set an alarm. I have to stop what I'm doing. We just were in the moment, and we paid $65 for being uninterrupted in the moment, creating things that make us far more money than $65, which was the asshole tax that we paid for that one time in whatever number of years that we forgot to move a car that we forgot we had rented and was therefore on the street rather than in the spot that the Tic Tac resides in. Reframe some of the money stuff that might feel sticky for you. I find that this helps in so many other areas, but of course, when we start to clean up our money mindset, we start to be in receiving mode far more often for all the goodies that are coming our way, for all the value that we put out into the world with the things that we create as artists. Not bad. What's your latest $200 lesson? I want to know. Let me hear from you. Till then, this has been Bonnie Gillespie saying, make your paper, baby, and stay ninja. Mwah.